Oh. Oh. Did you make it clear?
Yeah. Well, I tried to ignore it, and I tried to avoid it. Now I'm going to make it clear.
Yeah. Okay, it looks like it's 5:30, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We really appreciate it. If you haven't been here before, there should be copies of the agenda back here in the back. You're welcome to grab a copy if you like. I'd like to go over a couple of things real quick. And we should move here. I'll do this later. We'll go ahead and start with the invocation. Andrew, would you help us with that?
I would like to ask for your guidance and wisdom as we make decisions to impact our city, not just for tonight, not just for this week, but for the coming years in front of us. With your knowledge and guidance, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Nisley,
Here.
Savastos,
Here.
Peterson,
Here.
Lucas,
Here.
Lee,
Here.
Harmon,
Here.
Rieger,
Here.
Oscar.
Here. Okay, now, if you don't have a copy of the agenda, there should be some back here in the corner. I would like to, if you have one in hand, I would like to point out a couple of things. The meeting procedure. The public may address a specific agenda item at the pleasure of the mayor. If recognized by the mayor, please identify yourself by your name and address and limit remarks to 3 minutes or less out of respect to city employees. We request that any complaints or criticisms of employees not be aired in a public meeting. Concerns about employees should be brought to the attention of the city administrator or mayor. An individual in violation will be declared out of order. All right, we'll begin with the consent agenda. We'll move back up a little bit here. The current copy of the Open Meetings Act in Nebraska is posted on the wall at the back of the council chambers. Now we'll begin with the consent agenda. All matters under consent agenda are considered by the city council to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. Any city council member may, however, remove an item from consent by request. Item number 1 is approved minutes of August 4th work session, August 11, 2020. And item number 2, the mayor's appointment of Tristan Weiner to the City of North Platte Planning Commission. I'd like to let y'all know that Tristan is on Zoom at the moment. Item number 3, the mayor's appointment of Nelson Jett to the City of North Platte Planning Commission. Nelson's in the room if you want to say hi or something. Hi. Thank you, Nelson, for being here. Item number 4, adopt a recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission for preliminary final approval of original town second replat located at 220 West 6th Street and 513 through 515 North Sycamore Street. Item number 5, adopt a recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission for preliminary final approval of Kuchera 5th Division located at 604 West Phillip Avenue and 611 Francis Street. Item number 6, adopt a recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission for preliminary and final approval of the Moline second replat located at 4421 South Willow Street. Item number 7, authorize the mayor to sign a computer-aided dispatch and record system and service agreement with Motorola in the amount of $874,000. Item number 8, authorize the mayor to execute an Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant JAG, application request for $11,733, and required certified assurances. Item number 9, authorize mayor to sign the cable service franchise agreement between the city of North Platte, Nebraska, and Spectrum Mid-America LLC, the cable operator. And item number 10, send application of Misty Beitler as liquor license manager at Love's Travel Stop, number 390, located at 3211 South Newberry Road, North Platte, Nebraska, to the Liquor Control Commission with no recommendation.
Do we approve items 1 through 10 of the consent agenda?
Second. That motion passes. Welcome, Nelson, and Kristen can hear me. Welcome as well. All right, item number 11, regular agenda. We have a public hearing and action on ordinance number 4036, amendments to chapter 151 Housing Maintenance and Occupancy Code as amended. We'll read this ordinance here shortly.
Motion to close public hearing?
Whoa, wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
I thought you guys were in the midst of something, so I was waiting. Mark Wood, 902 North Emory. I'd like to speak against this. Excuse me. I used to have a note. There's some things that worry me about this in the 151.001, one of the opening statements. I know it says you're adopting it by reference, and I'm a lawyer, I assume that means by reference to the certain code you're pulling out of it. But right below that, it says that you're adopting the whole code 2018, which scares me. And I read another one. This was in a different document. It was A104.1. It was actually the code itself. And it says you cannot waive requirements specifically provided for in this code, which would seem to mean that you have to take the whole code or nothing. Worries me that maybe someone will use this to, I've heard rumors that there are lawsuits because we don't, enforce these codes enough. And these sound like openings to get the whole code enforced. To me, it's a landlord-tenant dispute, and I don't see where the city needs to get involved. When someone destroys my house, I don't come to the city, for help to remedy the situation. I take care of it. And the tenant has the same right to legally come to me and take me to court and have things resolved. This is a first incremental step, and I fear that we'll go on and we may, I don't know that the building inspectors can handle it. They already have a full-time job, and we'll have to appoint more people and maybe a whole nother department, to do all this. And this was just supposed to be for rental units, but it is now encompassed every building in town. The city can tell me what to do to my own house. When I retire, I may want to go travel. I may want to spend every penny I have to go travel. But if I let my house run down, the city could come tell me how to spend my money. This is a real overreach of the government. It's just on top of everything else. The government shut down our businesses. It worries me. You know, these people, some of the people bringing this stuff up, they seem to know where these people live who are having these problems with their tenants. I mean, with their landlords, excuse me. You know, I don't know, one thing I'm thinking is if they're really concerned about them, they could walk them through it, get them to court, get them to sue the landlord. You know, I'm against bad conditions. I'm not for horrible landlords, but I'm not for the city taking over. I don't think the building inspectors want to be landlord police and get in the middle of these disputes. I think there's a better way to do it, and this is not the way. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I want to make a comment real quick here, if I may, and we'll get to everybody that wants to speak, but I want to go back over the meeting procedures to make sure everybody understands this. The public may address the specific agenda items at the pleasure of the mayor. Recognize the mayor, please identify yourself by your name and address and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. We are going to keep time. And I appreciate what you said, Mark. I truly do.
Was I over time?
I don't know because we're keeping time. But we are now.
Well, that's why I stopped, because I thought I was trying to get close to 3 minutes. I know the rule.
I think you were, but we're going to keep track.
Okay, well, I apologize if I did.
No problem. I want to hear what everybody has to say.
Oh, I
want
agree.
everybody to have that opportunity. So if you would all be so kind as to follow those guidelines. I think, Andrew, you had a question?
Yeah, I just had a question, Mark, for you real quick. You got a second?
Yes.
So you said you were afraid of us, you know, if we adopt these. One, we already have codes, but
Yes.
so if we have this, what exactly in there are you afraid of that would not be in compliance? What part of the new language in there is it that scares you?
Well, the codes you have net, I mean, those are pretty vanilla. It's the incrementalness of government. This is passed, and I mentioned the two things I'm worried about where, you know, it could be brought up that we have to adopt the whole code. The A104.1 that says you cannot waive any of the requirements of this code, which tells me you can't do what you're doing, just pick and choose out there. And it says right in 151.001 that, I mean, the way I read it is that you're accepting the whole code, which just opens the city up for a loss.
I was just curious on what specific, you know, thing in there you were worried about. Like, you know, if it was a truss or, you know, a stairwell or something like that you were worried about.
No, I'm not worried about any of that. I'm worried about, my main thing is I don't think this is the city's job to be involved in landlord-tenant disputes. I don't think it's a purview of city government to do that. You know, I have no problem ever working things out with my tenants. I've never been taken to court.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Could I speak?
Certainly. Be so kind as to give your name and your
Yeah,
address.
I'm Brian Plank, 2114 West A Street. I agree with what some of Mark said, and I take exception to adding a health inspector in North Platte. We don't need it. We do not need a health inspector in North Platte.
We're not adding a health inspector.
You're changing the title from a building inspector to a health inspector, is that right?
No.
Well, that's what it said in the paper.
I'm sorry if the paper said that.
Okay, well, I don't think we need additional inspections of homes in North Platte, period, okay? We need efficient city government, okay? We have a 40-man fire department. Why not take those guys when they're not doing fire stuff, go out and do inspections, check on homes and put smoke detectors in them, look for hazmat, look for debris piled around houses. Let's do something that's practical, okay? I just don't think that government is the way to reduce these unsafe conditions, okay? People do not want additional housing codes and housing inspectors snooping inside our homes. People don't want that. Renters don't want it, and landlords don't want it, and building owners. Okay. The city government's in the process of reducing our budget by 10%. We don't need to add additional employees as inspectors or stirring up a hornet's nest with people going out and looking at apartments. And what I see happening, I agree with Mark on one thing. We don't need a third-party arbitrator between the landlord and renters. That's not necessary. We don't need it. Just like Mark said, he works out problems with his renters one-on-one and takes care of it. Okay. If we install these codes, what's going to happen is renters are going to have a dripping faucet, and they're going to say, oh, I'm not paying my rent because of this code violation. We don't want to go there. Anyway, that's all I had.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
I'd like to go ahead and speak if no one else.
Donna was already, sorry, Donna was already up.
No, that's fine. I did my time.
Donna Tryon, 820 South Bryan. Actually, I'm not currently a landlord. However, I have been a landlord in Platte, Nebraska. And generally speaking, I am against the overreach of government, and I think everything that's been spoken tonight is the way I feel change. We already have codes on the books, and I don't even know that they're being enforced. However, if we pass something more stringent, it could be enforced in the future, and I think it could create some problems. And I don't see some of the landlords I know here because they want to stay under the radar. What does that tell you already? So please, I hope you've all read it before you vote. Thank you.
My name is Alicia Forbes. I live at 213 1/2 West First Street. I am the director for Mid Plains United Way. I think that this document is extremely important, not only for the opportunity of our children, but also for our future economic development. Many of you may be landlords. Many of you may be tenants. I can tell you that I am the person who deals with the individuals who have the landlords who are not fixing the problems. There are many great landlords in our community, many who work well one-on-one, but there are also landlords in our community who rule with fear-mongering. So tenants are afraid to ask for things to be fixed. Tenants do not necessarily have the opportunity or resources. And if you go in and you see some of these places, and it's not just impacting, individuals who, are doing bad things. It's affecting our children in our school system to the point where our school has started to step in and do home visits and see. There are photos showing the circumstances in which many children are living in. And today, we had the property resolution team meeting, and Mr. Lucas brought up, some of the concerns within this document, one of them being screens on apartment windows. Most landlords in our community do not provide air conditioning. It's not a requirement with our codes. I'm one of those tenants who does not have an air conditioner. This is not about big government stepping in. This is about creating equal, safe opportunity for every individual and resident in our community, because we are products of our environment. And if our children grow up in bad homes that do not have everything they need, what can we expect of them to contribute to our society when they get older? That's what I see the importance of this document as, and this document was created. I haven't heard of anything specific that anyone is opposed to. These seem like very reasonable issues. There are certain landlords that are not following these. That's why they're having to be stepped in and have this written. So I feel like these are very reasonable, and it's creating greater opportunity, not for us, but for our children. Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. This document was created because we now know better. So please give us the opportunity to have the tools and resources to do better.
Thank you, Alicia.
Good evening. My name is Eric Seacrest. I live at 109 South Maloney Drive. Thank you for the opportunity. The housing study of 2018 identified two big problems for our community. One is slum rentals. The other is abandoned and dilapidated homes. We have many fine rental landlords. They deserve peace of mind. We also have few slumlords. The housing study estimated 215 slum rentals in the community. What are these problems? Structural collapse, no running water, no heat, standing water in the house, holes in the exterior or in the floors. Slumlords are bad actors. They hurt adults, they hurt children, they hurt neighborhoods, they hurt business recruitment, they hurt employee recruitment, they harm our community. We have thousands of fine homes in this community, but we have lots of abandoned and dilapidated homes. The 2018 housing study estimated or cited from studies there were over 400 abandoned, dilapidated houses in 2016. There's probably more. You know how many hundreds of houses don't have electricity. What does that tell you? Recent study showed there were over 900 vacant houses in this community. Some of them are for sale. Maybe a few hundred. What are typical problems? Houses are no longer maintained and haven't been for years. Structural collapse. Openings in the exterior due to missing doors, missing windows, holes in the roof. Abandoned and dilapidated houses harm neighborhoods and the entire community. And another thing that ought to be very important. These kind of houses waste the incredible investment by taxpayers and ratepayers in streets, water lines, sanitary sewers, storm sewers, and electrical lines. They're not even used. It's hard to come up with anything beneficial about slum rentals or abandoned, dilapidated houses. That's why a housing code is important to virtually every community in this land. The city has had a housing code for decades. This is a revision. And it makes sense to use a standard code that's clear and familiar to building inspectors, a standard code that's familiar to contractors. And it also makes sense to eliminate items that don't relate to safety or to health. And it makes sense to designate the building inspectors in the code.
Harry, your time's, can you finish?
I have 1 sentence.
Awesome, thank you.
And it makes sense that there are appeal processes and ways to amend the code. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Mel McShane, 3402 West F Street, and I'd like to speak in support of the code. We have wonderful landlords in our community, and the majority of them take really good care of their property. But it's those few exceptions that result in harm to not only the individuals living in there, but a perfect example is a home health nurse that visited with me and talked to me about an institution or a place where she had to go, a rental, where it was the middle of the winter. The individual was in the back bedroom, freezing. There was no heat, a big hole in the floor of the trailer. That individual died probably 2 weeks after that. And that home health nurse shared with me that the environment was what part of the cause of that death in her mind. But also that hole was so big that the home health nurse was afraid about falling through the floor. So it's not properties that we're talking about that are well taken care of. It's those exceptional ones that really need some attention for the safety, not only the people living there, but also the individuals that come in and care for them. We have a problem with bed bugs in our community, and it's cost our institution and our public service, our fire, our ambulance, a lot of extra work and a lot of money, because there's no standards for helping keep that bed bugs out, and it's a constant infestation. So we've had multiple people that have been hospitalized or treated in the ER because of that multiple infestation of bed bugs. Another good example is a young man that spent over $1 million of resources in our community because he didn't have a running electricity in his home. So his diabetic medication couldn't be refrigerated, so he couldn't take it. It's really issues like that. And I think we have to put aside the fact that we're talking a small minority here. We're not talking about the majority of landlord people because they do a good job. It's really that small group that are impacting our children, our professional staff that are trying to take care of people. And so we need to not only look at the individuals in the home, but protect those people that are trying to take care of them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Judy Peterson, 411 Sandpiper Way. I just want to agree with what Mal was saying. This is a small group of people, and yet it is having a tremendous impact. One thing that we've seen over the years, especially with places, with agencies like Habitat for Humanity, Lincoln County Community Development, when they go in and they start to make improvements to one house in a neighborhood, many times that has a domino effect. The neighborhood starts to clean up. It happens, and it's one of the great things about those organizations because they all work with limited funds, but they have that kind of impact to the community. The young man that Mr. McNay was talking about, we actually helped him to get into a different living situation where he actually now can have a refrigeration. The city was remarkably helpful with that situation, trying to work through that with that family and the conditions that they were in. They didn't land on them, they didn't fine them, they didn't put them in jail. They helped them with a roll-off, they helped them with extra time, they helped them with communication. This is not a thing about coming into these people's homes or the landlord's property and doing government overreach. This is about really looking at those situations, doing what's right for the people that are involved, and making the situation better. And in doing that, we can start to raise the tide on those neighborhoods. And that's really what we want to see. We know that the city doesn't have enough staff and resource to go out and inspect every home here. And that's not at all what they're intending to do. They want to be able to respond to complaints. They want to have a housing code that allows them to enforce. And that's what this one does. It doesn't truly change a lot of what we have on the books right now. It just makes it clearer so that it's more enforceable. And that's really what we want. There's no reason to waste their time to go out and look at something that they're responding to a complaint and then find out they really aren't able to do anything because they can't enforce the code. So this helps them out. I think it will be a good thing for our community, and I just appreciate the opportunity to come before you and to have this item on the agenda, and hopefully you'll consider passing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think.
Sure.
Sure.
This is in addition to what you already said.
It is. It's something new. As far as Andrew's question, I would have been happy to have had health inspector change to building inspector in our old code, and it would have covered it fine. And all these fine people who just spoke for this new code, they made my point. they come in contact with these people first, they can immediately help them to get satisfaction and get these problems solved through charitable organizations and other groups. We don't need the city. It would be quicker for them because they come in contact with it. The code isn't needed. What's needed is people to get these people help. Thank you.
If it'd be okay, I just wanted to ask my biggest question on this while we're still in public hearing in case some people involved with the process want to comment on it. The thing that I'm just still horribly torn on, I think this is a problem that needs fixed. I think we need more clarity. We need more enforceability. I'm all in with getting this fixed. I also like the appeals process that was developed. The thing I'm stuck on is why we had to tie it to the international code, to the standard code, because we've got this very disjointed. It's hard to follow. Even somebody who's familiar with this type of stuff, it's hard to read and follow what the code is. And I think about, like, what if we would have adopted the 2008 code back in 2010, 2012? Well, what would that be today if 2008 isn't on that website? I mean, you'd have to basically keep re-adopting this every couple of years, I think, to keep it functional. And so this group's worked very hard, and this is a problem. And so whether that be Judy Clark or Mayor, you or Terry, whoever spent the time making that decision of the pros and cons of tying it to the standard international code versus just writing our own code, I'd like you to comment on how you made that decision and weighed those pros and cons, because frankly, it's the issue I'm stuck on with how I'm going to vote on this.
I'm going to have Dave Hahn, building inspector, come up also. But I think the biggest thing is consistency. We've already adopted the international housing code, international residential code, international energy code, international fire code, and it's just consistency is mostly what it is. And so would have it been easier to take the code we had and just swap the building inspector? Maybe. But it's a lot more consistent if you have the same thing. They're used to the codes. They're used to reading the codes. It's, maybe I shouldn't say easy, but easy for them to interpret those because they've worked with them ever since. When was the first time we adopted in
2003.
Was it 2003?
Yes.
But do you want to come up?
Will you foresee that we'll have to keep updating this to keep up with it?
You don't have to, but yes, we generally, we consistently update our international residential code. We're on the 18 now with most everything except for the energy code, and we are looking at getting that updated also. So about every, what?
We go about every other cycle, every 6 years,
Yeah.
we update.
So yeah, I can foresee us needing to update this too at some point.
Councilman Lucas, if I may, just a couple of things. I guess from my perspective, the International Property Maintenance Code takes away the inspector's judgment. So the way the code was written was vague enough that they could go in and make the landlords responsible for whatever they wish. This removes that opportunity for their judgment. The second thing is, the International Property Maintenance Code, and Judy alluded to it, ties back to the other codes that are applicable to new buildings, specific renovated buildings, so on and so forth. So it makes reference to the International Building Code. It makes reference, as Councilman Reaper will speak to most likely, to the International Energy Code. So this completes the circle of code books that are used by municipalities, from my perspective.
Thank you. I did have some comments to make, I guess. I want to thank Judy and Terry for spending 45 minutes on the phone with me.
Yeah, before we go any further, we're still in public hearing. I'd like to, if there's anyone else that wishes to speak, her to hear them. Then we can make them, yes,
Could I just make a quick response to the previous statement?
sure.
Okay. Do I need to state my name and address again?
Nope, we have more. But
So
thank you.
The one thing that I do want to mention is nonprofits are working together, but there are certain aspects that we cannot take control over. I looked into the possibility of trying to legally police these landlords into fixing up their homes, and it puts us at risk for huge lawsuit. And then that in turn puts so many other families at risk, children not being able to get clothes, seniors not getting food, the list goes on. We fund 16 different nonprofit agencies in our community. So this is the policing of landlords is not something that we can do as much as we would like to. And if we have the funds from and donations from the community to be able to create a structure in which we could give more rental units and kind of police in that way, we certainly would, but we do not have the funds, and especially in this current state of our economic pandemic, it's going to be a tough year on every single nonprofit. So with the expectation of nonprofits fixing the problem, it's not something we can do alone. That's why I said, please help give us the tools and resources so we can help our community. And this is a part of that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you want your job? Terry Woods, 902 North Emory.
I apologize. What was your first name? Terry?
Terry.
Terry. Thank you.
We have rentals. I'm trying to picture what I have to do before a tenant moves in now if this is adopted. I think I'm gonna have to do a video and prove that every single window has a screen. Every door has a screen door and there's a screen in it. Because invariably, somebody moves out, half the screens are gone. Not just the screen, the whole frame, everything is gone. And I wish I would have bought stock in a screen door company before we bought rentals, because geez, we would have made a fortune. But I just don't know how you protect the landlord who are good with this. And peeling paint, we have a lot of houses that have peeling paint. And eventually we want to side them. So it's really kind of a waste of money to paint them in the meantime. So, and I know that's one of the things listed, and so I'm just waiting for somebody to come tell me I have to paint the house when I want to side it. And the one other thing that just seems totally minuscule and stupid, that the Firepit Code. You can't build your own fire pit if we adopt this. You have to buy a manufactured one. Even though you could use non-combustible materials and do it yourself, you can't. It has to be a purchased one. And if you want to roast a marshmallow, you're going to have to get a permit from the fire department, because the only way you can do it without a permit is to use charcoal. And I'm sorry, most fire pits, they're not using charcoal, they're using wood. The kids will want to do their marshmallows, but that's a food. So it's going to be a problem. Half the people in town are going to be breaking the law. Thank you.
The Firepit Code is exactly what is already in the city code. Nothing was changed. It's just also being added to this code. Because when the inspectors are out, they have the opportunity to look at that. So again, it's a safety issue, but it's exactly the same. So there is no change whatsoever on what was there. And I believe we took peeling paint out, right?
did.
So peeling paint isn't in there either. So I don't think so. I referred to those two, but I think it was quite a discussion because Dave had an idea about that, but Ed's concerned it's in there. So if you could maybe address
Oh, we
that.
took that out.
Interior.
Okay, yeah, it's not, so, yeah.
Thank you.
The end.
Guess I've been breaking the law already.
Anybody else wish to speak? This is a public hearing. Yes, sir.
Do I need to kind of come up there? Or?
Sure. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay. I'm Brian Plank. You know, I've turned in some code violations to the city inspectors where there was appliances on the front porch and cars jacked up in the front yard. Looked like redneck heaven. And they never called me back. They never started a file. They never went out and looked at it. So I don't know. I mean, so what I'm saying is I'm not sure what our current inspectors are doing. You know, there's no follow-up with a phone call, no nothing. So can anybody answer that? What's going on?
Can you tell me what
I'd
it was?
like to answer that right at the moment, but we'll certainly look into it.
Okay.
Can you give me some dates?
I'll give you an address, 2020 West 2nd. It was about probably 60 days ago.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Donna Twain again. I too have had contact with the code enforcement office and haven't always gotten.
I think I mentioned at the beginning of this, I didn't really want to list
Oh,
complaints
that's right.
about
Okay,
our employees. If you have a complaint, please come in.
okay.
That's same to you, Mr. Blank. If you have some complaints, please come in and we'll discuss those and we'll see if we can correct them. Sure. But this isn't the place to discuss whether an employee did something or didn't do something or did something you weren't supposed to. But if you want to talk about something else, I'd be happy to listen.
I have a question.
Sure.
So people that work for the city drive around, and is it possible for them to note addresses where there are code violations and get it to the proper police? Or I was under the impression that it's kind of like a neighbor had to rat out another neighbor, which I'm really not into that. So just a question.
Well, we do operate on complaints, obviously, but if one of our people see a violation of some sort, then yes, they can stop and correct that violation.
Good to know. We may have to have a chat.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have some other different.
Something new, I hope.
Something new.
Come on up.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark was 902 North Emory. I don't know how I forgot this, but another problem to this is if we get these landlords, fix these houses up, which is a fine thing, we'll have better homes and they'll be safe. I'm not against that. But the rents are going to go up. And the people that live there probably won't be able to afford the new rent. So they're going to be out. I mean, there's going to be a safe house then, but then you have the problem, these people, where are they going to be? Living in their car, living on the street, living the Lincoln connection? This is very complicated. You know, what are we going to do with those people? Just a thought.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing. Is there anybody else who wants to talk?
Second.
And that motion passes. Public hearing's been closed. Ed, you had some comments, I understand?
As you, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Listening to the folks speaking here tonight, I think almost without exception, they all said that it's a few landlords that are causing the problem. I don't personally think it's proper to penalize all the landlords for a few. I don't think that's the proper way to go. And Mr. Woods made a comment about the increased cost of the rent. Certainly, if the landlord has higher costs to maintain his property, he's got to recover that cost in some manner, and that's going to be translated into higher rent. So people have a tendency to move into the house that they can afford. That's kind of human nature. And so if you can't afford a $100,000 house, you're probably going to live in a $50,000 house. If you can't live in a $50,000 house, you live in a $25,000 house. And so the concern that I have, again, kind of restates what Mr. Wood says. regarding the higher rental costs, where are these people gonna live if they can't afford to pay the rent? That's a big concern of mine. Just as a point of reference, it's my understanding that Nebraska is one of 2 states and out of 50 that's adopted the International Building Code 2018. And I'm not sure what that says, but it says to me that maybe we shouldn't be rushing into this. As some of the things that I brought up with Terry Waite and Judy earlier on the phone were some concerns that I have in the language of the code, the proposed code. I think it's 302.8 talks about cars that are there and being dismantled and maybe repainted or overhauled or some such a thing. But it says that if you're going to repaint, you have to have an approved spray booth. Well, what if I want to rebuild my 57 Chevy in my garage? And I know Terry and Judy said, well, that's going to be a subjective situation. And it will be a subjective situation, I suppose. But according to the statute, I've got to have an approved spray booth. So does that mean that I can't fix my 57 Chevy in my garage? I saw a gentleman on Buffalo Bill here last year that bought a horse trailer. It looked kind of rough. It was sitting on a driveway, and they spent a lot of time hand sanding it, and they painted it with a brush. Do they have to have an approved spray booth to paint it with a brush? It says paint. It doesn't say how you put the paint on. So that's one concern that I have there. I had a number of them here, and I'm not going to bore you with all of them, but there's one that I did want to ask Mr. Lewis about, and I think that was addressed about the commercially manufactured non-combustible fire pit. I understand it may be part of the fire code. I think there's probably some people in town that are very capable of making a fire pit that's just as good or maybe better than the bottom one.
I'm George Lewis, City Fire Marshal, North Platte Fire Department. The reason for the regulations that we have for Doug Stack and he had me check other communities comparable to North Platte. And we combined what they had and what we had. And we determined that 3 feet diameter fire pits are more controllable than like a 5-foot when people roll logs into the fireplace. Then the 25-foot travel distance or distancing from structures or public way is well known around the state in different communities, and then also the fire code. And the reason for that, if the fire should get out of the fire pit, it's not going to spread into the structure or to the neighbor's house. And the reason we come up with these regulations is because we get complaints all the time from neighbors have their windows open during this time, and they're burning in the fire pit, and it's right close to the fence, and it's going into their house, and the smoke's going into their house and contaminating their house. So that's why we came up with these regulations.
George, is it going to make any difference whether it's a commercially made fire pit or if I make it in my garage?
Well, the reason we come up with commercial is because it's manufactured, and also a lot of the manufactured ones have the screen on top or the lid, and it has a screen on the sides. That's considered contained. In the state of Nebraska, there's a no open burning through the state. It's left up to the state, the fire department, local fire department, to issue burn permits for burning debris and stuff like that. Well, Doug Stack's interpretation was if it was an open fire pit, that's considered open burning, so it's required to have a burn permit.
And I'm not arguing that. That makes perfect sense to me. I understand that.
And that's
I guess the point that I'm concerned about is why are we limiting people to having to buy a fire pit when they may be very capable?
Well, I'm sure, but we just didn't want, like I said, 6-foot wide fire pit and having them roll logs in and then burning all night. and then going to bed, and then we're getting called.
Well, we call out 3 feet in diameter.
Yeah.
Right here, so, anyway, I think you understand my concern.
And we haven't been enforcing it real strong. We usually go out on complaints. And if they don't have the setbacks and stuff like that, we tell, it's, don't meet the requirements and you gotta stop using it.
I understand that perfectly well. There's a house that I drive by about every day where apparently they got the grill a little bit too close to the line of sight.
Yeah. Yeah, or on the
I don't know
deck,
how their
on the wood
hamburgers
deck.
tasted. They probably didn't taste very good.
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
you bet.
Can I ask a question, Paul? Oh, sorry.
I have something I want to say real quick, if that's okay.
Sorry, I didn't see you guys over there.
Yeah, I feel like I'm on
I was
oxygen.
watching Ed's face.
I want to make a statement to the gentleman in the back, just so that everybody understands, we're not hiring any new positions here for them. It's existing, so there's not going to be any increase in salary or wages for that. The second thing I want to mention is a blank statement here is we're getting way overboard on this. We have to have a housing code. I mean, if we didn't, just can imagine what it would be like if we didn't have a code. Secondly, the landlords that are sitting in this room, you got nothing to worry about, in my book, because you do everything right. And we're not going to send Dave and Norm and his crew out every day and start searching for them. It's going to be complaint-based. It's going to be health-based. You have nothing to worry about. We're making way too big of a deal out of that. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
That's a Firepit question. I mean, how many times, Dennis or George, I guess either one, have you guys gotten calls where, there was fire pits that were too close and they caused damage to the house and you guys had to go out? Let's say in the last 5 years, 3 years. I mean, I'm sure they still exist because I can buy a commercial. I can tell you my commercially bought one right now is probably 5 feet from the back door, but I really haven't used it in 2 years. So I'm just curious, have you guys had any calls?
Yeah, through the years, yeah. We've had them to where, like I said, if you let them burn and they went to bed, we get called because the grass is on fire and it's heading towards the garage or the structure.
So you guys have had several calls because of fire pit issues?
Yes. Okay. And like I said, we've got several complaints on people burning in their fire pit, and the neighbor calls up complaining because the smoke's going into their house.
That's hard to regulate though.
I know,
we can put it anywhere in the backyard and you get it, it's Nebraska. I mean, everybody's gonna know the wind blows and it's probably gonna blow in somebody's direction at one point in time.
I understand that, but we get the complaints, so we gotta go out and check them.
Yeah, I get it. I'm just saying, like the wind, whatever, how much you can do to stop wind blowing smoke somewhere. But in terms of the damage, I mean, obviously there has been damage here in Platte because fire pits were left unattended or not maintained like it should have been. So.
Where it's already in the fire code, if we put this also in the property maintenance code, that somewhat duplicates it. Does that alter the penalty then if somebody has a fire pit issue and doesn't comply with this, penalize them more now that this is in the property maintenance code?
I don't think, usually what we do, like I said, we go out and check it, and if it's not in compliance, we just ask them, we tell them what the requirements are. We actually give them a copy of the requirements and say, this ain't gonna work because of the setbacks. Usually it's what we run into.
There's a couple of random thoughts. Everyone should have a landlord like Mr. Woods. I lived in rental properties during our early years. That was in the 1950s. Go back way. And we had some good landlords and we had some crummy landlords. And I suggest that the crummy ones may represent a larger portion than some have alluded to here. It's not like they're an endangered species. There are landlords out there who really don't give a rat's rear end how I have to live. And unfortunately, the good landlords are the ones that penalize for the behavior of minority of landlords. I'll say it's a minority of landlords that some of them could be considered, in my view, predatory. They're out there. And so that's why Big Brother has to step in and try to protect the little guy. A lot of what government does is try to protect the little guy in some way. And that's really what this comes down to. I don't see the government coming in here and hiring a battalion of stormtroopers to go around and see if someone's faucet is leaky, for heaven's sake. I just don't see it happening. It's not possible to go around and really implement it, every letter of this code. You wouldn't be willing to pay the salaries we would be involved with to make that happen. I think, like George says, a lot of this that stuff happens on a complaint basis. It's not like they're, George has got 5 guys out there looking at fire pits. And so I think that reasonably applied, I think this is a necessary evil that we have to have this sort of thing. But I think it is our responsibility to care about people who are living in horrendous circumstances. It's a health issue, and I think it's a moral imperative that government be involved with this at some level. But there will always be those, no matter what we do, going to be seen as overreaching of government. And by the way, I'm sensitive to that too. I think a lot of times the government does go clear over the top. For example, the smoking code. There are places out in the middle of a meadow near some government building where if I were a smoker, which I'm not, I don't allow it anywhere around me, I couldn't stand out there in the middle of that field and light up a cigar or a cigarette. Frankly, I think we kind of went over the top with the smoking thing, but that's just an example of what sometimes government does kind of go over the top. But I don't see people sitting around here that think that we ought to go out and micromanage how a landlord runs his property. But I think there are certain minimums that are reasonable that we have a responsibility for the little guy out there that really needs some help here. And so, and whether or not we should adopt the international building code or not, I don't know. I was interested to hear what Ed said about only 2 other states that adopted it. Maybe that ought to get explored a little bit. There's maybe some good reasons why they did not. And also, if we do adopt that, I think Ty might have referenced this. Does that mean every time they change it, that we automatically change it? And the drift that I get is that that's not necessarily so, that we will learn of it, decide whether or not we want to adopt that new element of that code. Am I correct in that? So I think reasonable people trying to do the right thing will probably come as close to doing the right thing as we can get, since we're all fallible human beings. So anyway, just some thoughts. I don't like government overreach either, but I care about the victims of not taking care of the essentials. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I've got a couple comments to make. Please do. First of all, I just wanted to say there's no way I'm trying to prevent this code from being, being adopted. I don't agree with good part of it. I do believe that we have to have rules and regulations. I really do believe that. I am concerned about, as Jim said, the government overreach. I don't believe that any department's gonna have a tribe of people out there peering in windows to see whether I have cracks in the walls. At least I hope they don't. You might see more than cracks in windows. But anyway, having said that, there's one other issue that I did want to address in this. And if we look at 151.257, it talks about the revolving fund. And there's no cap on that. And that money is specifically relegated to the cost of repairs or demolition. And I don't have any idea how much money we acquire in a year. White, do you have any idea? Or
It's not a lot. 60. I'm sorry, I don't want to give a number and have it be off, but it's not a great deal.
a lot means 6,000,
I
60,000?
think it's more than that. Judy, do you recall?
50, isn't it?
50,000?
About 50.
50,000?
That's annually?
Well,
That's how much is in the fund now?
That's what's been in the budget.
that's how much is in the fund now, and that's what we've historically kept in that fund. Honestly, we haven't really been using it the way that we need to, but we are now, because you guys just adopted that
Just recently, yeah.
a couple of months ago or something. So it'll be a little bit different, so now it will grow at this point. But yeah, 50 is about historically what we've always had.
And I guess I would like to see us adopt a cap, because it seems to me like that we're gonna have a bunch of money, I don't know how much a bunch is.
I don't know how we would adopt a cap until we know how much we're going to take in.
Well, my concern is to like that we're gonna have money sequestered in here, and unless it gets spent specifically for these authorized expenditures, we have no way of using it. And so over a period of time, we could develop several $100,000 in this account, and we have no way of using it, because maybe our expenses will not expend that much money. So I would like to see us put a cap on there. If we've got 50 in there now, and that's a normal number, maybe we need to land on 100 to give us some cushion, and that could always be amended later on if we need to.
This fund's also allowing for donations. Isn't that going to be kind of tough if somebody wants to donate $1 million to it?
I think this is a subject that we need to discuss in the future. I don't think that has any bearing on what we're doing here tonight. That is something that we need to talk about in the future.
That's a separate resolution, it's already been passed. And if you want to go back and amend that, it's not part of this issue tonight. Well, you still have the power to amend later.
Okay.
And I didn't know if Ty's concerns have been addressed, but I'll leave the philosophical and policy questions that you know. But the reason for the more specific act is it makes it easier to enforce. Because this is a police action, or enforcement of this is in the nature of a police action, which is the police power given by the Constitution to the city. And so every criminal law is made up of essential or material elements. Proof of those essential or material elements is proof of guilt. And the burden of proof is on the city in these kind of cases. So the defendant, the potential slumlord, whomever, has to be reasonably apprised of the specific violation. That's addresses method form about the intent here. Judy and other people spend hours on this, is to have a specific code that people can refer to and know whether or not they're in violation. And that would make enforcement that much easier. Right now, we've got junk car ordinances that attack the constitutionality of it, because the city's current laws are somewhat vague. So far, so good, we've been upheld, but that's the reason for a more specific code. And the answer to Jim's very eloquent point, you don't have to adopt, it doesn't automatically refresh or adopt new versions. You can revisit it. Right now, we're just adopting this, if you decide to move forward. You're just adopting this code as it exists, subject to these modifications.
So are you saying, Terry, that we've already adopted this revolving fund?
We did that quote. We did that in April, I believe.
Yeah, we've done that.
Yeah, it was in April.
We funded it, we transferred money. Oh, yeah, but
one comment I'd make, I think those revolving funds, and I know there's a lot of talks about land bank ideas across the state, are a tremendous economic development tool, because there's a lot of people that have dilapidated property that don't know what to do with it and probably donate the property in many cases, but they don't want to pay for the demolition. And so that fund is a really powerful economic development tool to freeing up lots that already have infrastructure. There's a lot of talk at the state level about legislation regarding the expansion of land banks, and that's one of the focuses of them. So I think that fund will be pretty useful to us. You know, you guys know I'm torn on this issue with 2018. I think there comes a point where if you get so many years down the road, it almost becomes a functional problem. So one thing that worries me is just having that moving target of having to update it and having existing property have changes in code. But I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna vote to pass it on first reading and keep looking at that issue. But I really like what the group did with the appeals process. And if you haven't looked at that closely, I would encourage you to as we go through this process, because they have it going to the Board of Adjustment, and I think that's a wise decision and a good offset to some of the concerns I've got with the international standard, because we have the tool of coming back and adding more alterations to the code as a city council, but then we also have a Board of Adjustment that isn't this venue of people that have been appointed with expertise to help solve some of these dispute items, and then the landlord still has due process. And so as I continue to think about this, I'm starting to feel like the cons, you know, the thing I'm concerned about, which is this moving target and maybe a higher standard that we're tying to. But I think the group's done a pretty good job of trying to build some backstop to that. That's the way I'm feeling at this point.
You know, I've been listening to all this conversation, and my thoughts are, if not us, then who? And if we don't have a document to back up what we're trying to do, it's not going to work. And if the document is wrong, we can change it. So I don't see all the fuss about the little things. If there's something that's a little thing in there and we don't like it, or somebody else doesn't like it, then let's change it. But let's have some place to start from. And this is a really good start. Thank you.
Is there a motion on the floor? Has there
No.
been a motion made?
I really don't see
Does
us.
someone want to make one?
I will move that we adopt ordinance number 4036, amending chapter 151, housing maintenance and occupancy code, section 151 of the city of North Platte code of ordinances relating to the adoption of 2018 international maintenance code as amended.
Second.
Yes, sir.
We can talk more. I really don't see us gather enough tons of money in that fund. If we do, we can find ways to repurpose it, I'm sure. I remember about 8 or 10 years ago, there were two houses that sat just west of Buffalo School, directly adjacent to Buffalo Elementary. And I mean, they were falling down. They were awful. I mean, it was an eyesore. The owners obviously had no interest in them to rehab them or use them in any way. I mean, they sat there for years. They were about to fall in on their own. And we got a complaint. Nobody went up there with a bulldozer or I don't know if we get over. We did get a complaint from some of the neighborhood. And through with a spirit of cooperation and desire to work together with the owners, a little help from the city with some equipment, we raised both of those houses to the ground and leveled it without making anybody upset, without upsetting the landowners. They were tickled to get some help to get rid of it. And so I think that no matter what we use as a backdrop for action that we take on many of these things, it's, with a spirit of cooperation and a desire to reasonably apply this code. I don't think it's gonna be a horror story. I think it's gonna be good for the community, and I'm in favor of adopting it. Thank you.
Say something real quick. Please. Okay. Just, you know, I just kind of wanted to like, I mean, Glenn and Carmen and Mayor, you were here, you know, about 7.5 years ago when we started working on the mobile home ordinances and trying to clean up some of the most gratuitous areas of North Platte. And that's when we had to use some of those funds that are now the revolving fund was the, you know, because the county then took those homes because they were abandoned mobile homes, and we had to do something. We had to have a fund to be able to tear them down and be able to move and get that property, you know, that land to be able to be redone. And I see this as really just the second part of what we started back, the few of us that are still here, yeah, that we started way back then. This is just the second part of that, you know, trying to get to the next phase here. You know, now we've done mobile homes, which is the worst offenders, and now we're trying to crack down on the worst landlords, and we're trying to make an even playing field for everybody. So that way landlords were doing their jobs, and, you know, I've had landlords here in town that were doing their jobs. And so that way they're playing on an even playing field. They're not being raked over the coals and like, well, I can go get this house over here for $200 less, and then they're evicted, you know, they're forced to be kicked out. And I can tell horror stories, but I'm not going to here of people that were told, just go ahead and leave then if that's how you feel, you know, opposed to the landlord fixing things. And so I'm glad that they're going to have to play by the same rules as everybody else now. So that way, you know, Mark can make an honest, you know, can make honest income off of his rentals, and Lawrence and everybody else that has rentals, you know, it'll be an even playing field for all of you guys, a baseline.
Ready to vote? Thank you. All those that spoke, I really appreciate it. Can you read the ordinance?
We make a motion to waive the public reading of ordinance number 4036. So what do we vote?
No, just wait to read. It's already passed.
Oh, with that included in the motion? Okay, as amended on the motion. Main motion was amended to waive the reading of the ordinance.
Wait, I think you need a separate vote on the motion. I think the ordinance passed, but as the issue came up, of do you need to read it again? And you made that?
Well,
right.
I thought you said make that as, okay, sorry. So you want a second motion to not waive reading?
No, to waive.
Yeah, to waive it.
Right.
Okay.
That doesn't alter future, the need for future.
Still have more meeting.
Okay, great.
So if we can vote on that, we can amend it to sorry.
So he doesn't have to read the whole thing out loud.
Don't you just read the title?
Have it.
That's right.
Well, we already have this motion, and it's already have a motion, and I think everybody voted, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll come up with the same. There you go, 8-0. Thank you, motion passed, we're onward. All right, Judy, and everyone that spoke, thank you very much, we appreciate it. And all those other folks, we really appreciate you coming in and speaking. Item number 12 is a public hearing and action on recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission for approval of an application by Rivers Edge Golf Club LLC for a conditional use permit to allow seasonal dwellings on property described as part of the northwest 1/4 southwest 1/4 and part of the south 1/2 west 1/4 of section 28 township 14 north range 30 west of the 6th PM Lincoln County, Nebraska, and part of the northeast 1/4 of the section 29 township 14 north range 30 west of the 6th PM Lincoln County, Nebraska, located at 1008 West 18th Street.
I think that's where the old tennis courts used to be.
It is.
That's correct.
Yeah.
This is a public hearing. If anybody wishes to speak.
Motion to close public hearing.
Sorry.
And public hearings have been closed.
I now move that we adopt recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission for approval of an application by Rivers Edge Golf Club LLC for a conditional use permit to allow seasonal dwellings on property described as part of the northwest quarter, southwest quarter, and part of the southwest half, west quarter of section 28, township 14, north range 30 west to 6 PM, Lincoln County, Nebraska, and part of the northeast quarter of section 29, township 14, north range 30 west to 6 PM, Lincoln County, Nebraska, located 1008 West 18th Street.
Second.
As presented in the materials.
That motion passes. All right, item number 13. Public hearing and action on a recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission for approval of an application by Fall Haver Properties LLC, owner and Bruce and Sherry Dotson, purchaser, for an amendment to the North Platte Comprehensive Plan 2011 future land use map to amend certain lands from residential low density to public/quasi public owned property described as Lot 10, Block 5, the Chair's Addition, North Platte, Nebraska, located at 1220 South Willow Street.
Yes.
And again, this is a public hearing if anybody wishes to speak.
Motion to close public hearing.
And that motion passes.
I now move that we approve item number 13 as presented in the materials.
Second.
Passes. Item number 14, public hearing and action on recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission for approval of an application by Fall Haver Property. Did I just read that? Properties LLC owner and Bruce and Sherry Dawson purchaser to rezone certain lands from R2 dwelling district to an H1 hospital district on property described as Lot 10, Block 5, Chair's Addition, North Platte, Nebraska, located at 1220 South Willow Street. And once again, this is a public hearing. If anybody wishes to speak.
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
Glad it wasn't just me forgetting.
closed.
There's been a request for consideration of reading waive on this. I know it's comments about that. I'm curious.
I'd like to make a motion, I move that we waive 3 readings on ordinance 4038.
Second.
Thank you. And that motion passes.
Now move that we adopt ordinance, item number 14 as presented.
Second.
Item number 15, public hearing and action on recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission of approval of an application by Andrew Caleb for an amendment to a mobile master plan to allow RV seasonal parking on described as Lot 4, Wyman First Subdivision, North Platte, located at 1402 East 3rd Street. Yes, sir. Kind of provide your name and address, please.
My name is Richard Jepson, 1404 East 3rd. I am the resident park manager for Andrew Collins there, since she lives in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. She's just trying to rent the open lots in the trailer park for seasonal. I talked her into it because I have a sister-in-law that's a traveling nurse, and she goes from town to town in an RV and literally pays $500 to $700 a month to park one of those things, in an RV lot because they can't park in a trailer park. And I said, well, maybe we could go through this and see if we can get it done and save some of these traveling nurses and construction workers some money, being a little closer. We're close to Gary's, we're on 4th Street there, gas stations right across the street. It's seems like a no-brainer there. We're not trying to enlarge the park. We just want to rent the open spaces. That's all we're trying to do here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Mayor, I have a couple questions for Judy, whether that's better now or later.
Why don't we do that after the?
Certainly. Okay. Motion to close public hearing.
Public hearing's closed.
Now move that we adopt act number 15 as presented in the materials.
Second.
There was a second. My vote is for.
What?
We're voting on it already?
Yes.
There's no dialogue?
Yes, but I think there's some questions I can type.
I have a question too.
Okay.
Go ahead. We just need the motion to be able to talk.
Well, I have some major concerns about this. Again, conditional use permits, Judy knows that I don't care for them, but the fact that they just want to try to increase their rent by doing this. If you go over there, it's not in good shape as it is now. And I've got testimony from 3 or 4 or 5 individuals at the planning commission, neighbors there that are in my constituency. And they're very concerned about doing this and having people coming in every 20, 30 days and not being able to control it. And if you drive through that area, some of them might want to be on the new housing code enforcement thing. But to me, I don't see I don't think it's good for the neighborhood, I guess for lack of a better term, that they would have, and I don't know how they can monitor it and control it. There's a bus sitting over there now, and it sounds like that bus has been sitting there for years. According to one of the testimonies at the planning commission, there's it looks like an old party bus that's been sitting in that one vacant lot for how long?
About 3 months now. The guy moved to Omaha, rented a lot, just to park the bus. That's all he wanted, a place. He doesn't have any place in Omaha to park it. And I got with Andrew and said, you know, he's hooked up to electricity to keep the refrigerator and the battery charged. Doesn't have water in it, you know.
I think you were showing that as a lot that you want to rent out.
Yeah, they want to rent that one out as one of the lots. But, you know, it's just one of those deals. He needed a place to park it after he moved to Omaha because he was planning on going on some RV trips in the west end of the state. He just didn't want to drive it an extra 300 or 400 miles. You know,
Well, thanks for the info.
he just parking it there for the time being. His lot rent is due in September and it'll be gone.
The other concern I have too is as calls from, I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Oh, okay. Oh, you're telling me to speak up. The other concern I have is the previous calls from the North Platte Police Department to this area. And, there's been some issues in the past year over there too. And I feel that if we just allow 10, 15, 20, 30-day rentals to pull in town and pull out of town will not help the neighborhood at all.
Judy, I was trying to understand a couple things from the planning commission meeting and what we're doing. So the sites are 2 today, but it has is an approved mobile home master plan or what?
Okay,
I'm confused by what the zoning is today and how it's functioning, why it's not R4 maybe.
the zoning right now, so it's non-conforming, because the zoning right now, I believe I have in there's an R2.
Right.
So that does not allow for mobile home parks. So we would call it legal non-conforming, because at the time it was probably fine. I mean, it was probably allowed and was rezoned over the top of it. So to do an expansion or anything like that, we could not. We can't really rezone it to an R4 because it doesn't fit mobile home parks, supposed to be 8 acres. So, you know, you've got a non-conforming use at the present moment there. Generally, what we've done with mobile home parks, because most of our mobile home parks in the past, it's mobile home park. It is not an RV park. But through the years, things have kind of changed a little bit. So mobile home parks are required to submit a master plan. With this one being the age of it, the master plan is non-existent. They may have had one back when it was first created. So in order to allow them to do something different with their plan, we require that they amend their original master plan. We're assuming their original master plan was all mobile homes. We're requiring them to amend it. We do that through a zoning process, just an amendment to their master plan.
Okay. So it's not a change to the master plan, it's their master plan for that particular property.
Right.
And so they're currently grandfathered for the activity that they're doing today on the property.
Yes.
There was a property that's east of this that a couple years ago has somewhat similar request.
It was on 6th Street, I believe.
Maybe 6th and Bicentennial?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly where it was. They did a very similar thing to this.
What's been the back testing on that decision? Has there been problems, complaints, or any issues?
Not a lot of complaints. The one issue that they have, and I think Dave and I were just talking about this earlier today, is they're not filling it. They're really not getting a lot of interest of people to come in and fill it. So they may have just a couple in there, and I think they were allotted like 15, something like that when we did that master plan.
And last question. I don't think when I was all the years I was on the planning commission, we ever had a 4-4 tie.
Yeah.
So how does that result then in the recommendation? Is that determined by the chairman? I can't remember what the procedure is?
No, what happened is we have an odd number specifically for that reason, so we don't end up with that. That evening, our odd person out was not in attendance.
She was, but had to leave.
She was, but had to leave. And so what happened then was we had 8 people there versus 9, and so we ended up in a 4-4 tie. Nobody has the authority on that board like the mayor does to break a tie, so it ends in a 4-4 tie. The motion was to approve, came back to the 4-4, so that's how you guys got the result.
Okay, basically,
No decision, no recommendation, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Should it go back to the planning commission? Yeah, true vote? Yes.
Not really, I mean, they don't have any legal decision to make any decision. They can deny something, we can still approve it, you know, at this level. All they do is just give their opinion on it and then send it to us. So, I mean, send it back, it's not like.
Even if they turn it down 5-4, it still comes to us.
It can still come to us.
Yeah. Still.
Yeah.
Or they can just run it.
Well, yeah, or the people can pull their item.
I think their job's generally to scrub it with expertise and provide us a recommendation.
Discussion? Yes.
I'll just say on this one, like, I get the people's concerns about, you know, they're worried about, you know, transient nature of people coming in. I kind of applaud his idea of trying to create some revenue and trying to make the best out of the property that he's trying to manage, do what he can with. You know, a lot of these mobile homes are ones that I think don't necessarily always, a lot of these lots are smaller, if I remember right, when I was going through. Yeah, they don't comply with the new mobile home in terms of set down. So they're gonna be having to transition out of this anyway as those mobile homes come out. So really, I mean, this is a short-term gap for them to try to at least stay solvent, I guess, in the meantime. And ultimately, something else is gonna have to happen with this land, you know, because it can't stay a mobile home park forever. So I guess I don't really, I mean, no offense to some of the mobile homes in there, you kind of alluded to it, they're not the newest, best ones. And some of these, you know, someone wanted to come in with an RV trailer, like you said, maybe a traveling nurse or whatever. My aunt did the same thing. So I totally get what you're talking about. And to be honest, it might be an upgrade to the neighborhood.
I thought that thing was needs to be cleaned up.
Is your mic on? Go, please talk to your mic, please. Thank you.
I just thought that when I went over and looked at it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all that.
I looked at it the other day, again today, it needs cleaning up before we can pass that. I don't know how we do that.
I think something we just have to think about is we want to remember that R2 is a duplex and high density single family zoning.
So it's not, how do you think?
I mean, my point is R2 is a long ways away from the request that's on the table.
I just want to comment, I'm going to have to abstain on this matter. My office is actually close to where this property is at. I rented from the Wyman family. I know them, and they've been friends of mine. I just think I need to abstain on this.
Does the Wyman family still own this property?
Andrew Wyman.
She's a Wyman.
She's a Wyman. That's her name.
A daughter of Paul.
Yeah. Well, she's actually a sister. I just don't feel comfortable even voting on this issue, so I'm going to abstain.
I thought it didn't work. Still didn't work. Still not working. No. Your no button doesn't work. There we go. Okay, motion passes 4-3. All right, item number 6 16. Public hearing and action on the recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission for approval of an application by Stephen and Debbie Simpson and Benny and Angela Robinson for an amendment to the North Platte Comprehensive Plan 2011 future land use map to amend certain lands from residential medium density single duplex and multifamily to industrial on property described as the east 48 foot of lot 7 and all of lot 8. Plat 2 subdivision, North Platte, Nebraska, located at 1815 and 1905 East 6th Street. It is a public hearing. If anybody wishes to speak.
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
Yeah. My clicker's making yellow or blinking lights at me. I think the battery's almost dead.
That motion passes. All right.
Yep.
We just closed the hearing. Okay.
Now I move that we would adopt item number 16 as presented in the materials.
That motion passes. All right. Now, item number 17, public hearing and action on the recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission for approval of an application by Stephen and Debbie Simpson and Benny and Angela Robinson to rezone certain lands from an R3 dwelling district to a I1 light industrial district on property described as all of lot 8 except the west 66 feet of the south 150.66 feet. Platte View subdivision, North Platte, Nebraska, located at 1815 and 1905 East 6th Street. Again, this is a public hearing. If anybody wishes to speak.
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
I'm not sure what happened there. Only 2 you got to vote on that one.
Okay, start over.
And that motion passes. Public hearing has been closed.
I now move that we waive the pre-required readings on ordinance. Wait, hold on. That's not right. That's not the packet, right? I move that we just adopt item number 17 as recommended by the planning commission. Again, we're following instructions both ways.
Just to understand, does that mean that this would come back for future readings then? Okay, this would just be passed on first reading.
No.
This is just a public hearing. First reading.
No, this is action
This is action.
on the item.
That one should be, that one should be an ordinance. Yes.
We're not there yet, though. We're not there.
Okay. Well, not on,
Not in the waiver.
not there yet, sorry about that.
But we're on the rezone item of 17, right?
Yep.
Which would require 3 readings to pass unless otherwise waived. Is that correct? Okay.
That motion passes. Item number 18, adopt recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission for preliminary and final approval of Platte View third replat located at 1815 and 1905 East 6th Street.
We that we adopt the recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission for preliminary and final passage of plat view, third replat located at 1815, 1905, 6th Street.
Second. We on item 18?
Yes.
I'm not arguing with you, but it says the motion, the proposed motion is they move to adopt a recommendation of the City Planning Commission for approval of plat view, third replat, and a variance to the City of North Platte Municipal Code, section 155.093, lots D, the depth of a lot shall be no more than 3 times the width of the lot at the building line. That's a recommended motion. Would you allow that to be amended in that fashion?
Yeah, as the material recommended.
Yeah.
And that motion passes. Item number 19, public hearing and action on recommendation by the North Platte Planning Commission for approval of the City of North Platte PACE-North Platte NP District Manual as authorized by Nebraska Revised Statute Section 13-3201 to 13-3211.
Gary Pearson, President, North Platte Chamber Development Corporation. I just wanted to mention to the council that over the course of this past year, had 3 different development projects. Project developers asked if North Platte had this type of program, and they explored the fact that we do not. They encouraged us to look at the process and the program. It's been used very little outside the Omaha Lincoln area because it's a fairly new tool, but it is an additional economic development tool that can help provide some gap financing through private resources, not public resources, but it does require a public process to go through. Judy has worked very hard on putting together a manual with some practices that have been implemented in other communities that put this into an applicable use. So I would just encourage you to allow us to have that additional tool in the community to help developers. And I think you'll see it utilized on some upcoming projects. I think it's a critical part.
Thanks, Gary.
I would move that we adopt the North Platte PACE manual. We close public hearing?
We haven't closed public hearing.
Like a bajillion public hearings. Motion to close public hearing. Well, I've already marked that we had closed it, if that helps.
Okay, public hearing's been closed. Now,
I move that we adopt the City of North Platte PACE manual.
Second.
item number 20 has been removed by request of City Administrator Matt Gibbon. So we'll move on to item number 21. Adopt resolution approving claims and authorize the issuance of a warrant to Paulson Inc. in the amount of $395,541.40.
I move we adopt or approve with the resolution authorizing the issuance of 1 warrant as presented in the materials.
I'm going to abstain from the voting because of the purchaser affiliation.
That motion passes 9-7 with 1 extension. Item number 22, approve paving district number 835, bid and authorize mayor to execute contract between the City of North Platte and Shellco Construction.
I move to approve the bid and authorize mayor to sign contract for paving district number 835 as presented in the council materials.
Second. Since Mr. Berkman's here tonight anyway, I was wondering if we were able to catch any of those intersections that are in rough shape as part of this, that are within that block. I think it's on Union.
At the intersection of Reed And yes, we're going to go to the end of the trail north and south.
Great, thank you.
And Prentice put Shelco, and we used them several times in the past.
Yes, they did most recently, they did the asphalt at the rec center in the parking lot over there on the east side. They used to be Stulich Construction.
Yeah, I
And
know.
Shelco got bought by Shelco bought Stulich.
Thank you, Rick. Item number 23 is claims.
We'll get the claims.
That motion passes as well. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Everybody say yes?
Yes.
Not-